Hello and welcome to Wargamer 3D. So, first proper episode today, and we are going to talk about 3D printing, the two different types, what's the difference in both, what are they good for, and what are they not so good at. The first thing we're going to talk about are your two different types. So you have resin and 3D printing, which is really good for your miniatures and small objects of terrain, things that you might want to have a bit more detail in. The second type is FDM style printing, which is used mainly predominantly for bigger pieces of terrain, not so much for miniatures. It can be done, but they don't give you the crispest of finishes. So there are many different types of resin printers on the market from all different brands. You've got your Anycubic, you've got your Elegoo, you've got your Frozen as well. The brand that I've gone for is Elegoo. There is no right or wrong answer. It just depends on your situation and what you're doing. But I'll give you a quick rundown of what a resin printer does and how it actually works. So, as it stated, you use resin to create a three-dimensional object, and it does this by using a LCD screen, which is at the bottom. It uses UV light to cure the resin into layers. So you've got different things. So you've got the build plate, which is the metal plate that the actual resin sticks to and it adheres to. So that lowers into what's called a vat, where the resin is stored. It attaches itself to called the FEP, so the FEP sheet. So it's a really thin layer of plastic that sits above the LCD screen. When the UV light sends it up underneath the actual FEP, it hits the resin. That layer then adheres to the metal plate. Then what happens is the light turns off. It then lifts off the FEP plate. Sorry, the plate lifts off the FEP. And then it will go up to a certain height, which is done in the settings, and we'll get into more detail on that later on in different videos. But then it will lower back down again, attach itself to the FEP. Another layer will then shine through with the LCD screen, and it will repeat the process until it creates the actual 3D model. So it's all done via the file, so it's all done by the STL file, and we'll go into more detail into STLs and how they actually work, what it takes to create an STL file, and what is it overall, but we'll do that later. But that is just basically a quick rundown of how it actually works. So what do I find 3D resin printers good for? Miniatures is my number one, so actually being able to print 28mm miniatures on the fly, how I want them, different designs. So for 1 second I want, for example, some vampires, or if I want some skeletons, or if I want to print some Finnish infantry, a tank, for example, I can, and I can do it in any order that I like, and I can do it in a cost-saving measure. So the cost for the initial outlay of a resin printer isn't as bad as it used to be. You can pick these printers up from anywhere from £200, even sometimes a bit cheaper in sales. You can go all the way up to say £500, £600, £700, depending on how much you want to spend. But for this initial getting into actual 3D resin printing, I would recommend probably not spending any more than £500 would be your most you really want to your initial printer, unless you've got the budget, of course, and money's no object. You can spend more money, you can get different upgrades and different quality in the printers, but for what I find, you don't need to spend more than £500 as your initial outlay. It sounds like a lot of money, but over time, the amount of kits that you buy, and you want to invest that money into something that you can produce more cheaper items. So like the resin itself, the resin I use is, I'm going to give you another thing, 8K resin, which goes along with my printer. So again, just imagine resin is like your screen technologies for your television. So you've got your normal HD, your 1080p, then you've got like your 4K, then you've got your 8K. There is stuff that does 9K. It's all to do with the resolution of the actual LCD screen that shines through. It gives you a crisper finish, basically, for your model. And in all honesty with you, you don't really notice it if you're doing the 3-foot rule. You can get some really nice printers that are fair price at 4K now. Definitely for say £200-300 when they're on sale. There's definitely some of the Elegoo printers and the Anycubic printers that you can get 4K screens for that price. The downside to the cheaper printers is the actual build volume, so the actual size of the plate itself. So the cheaper printers will tend to have a smaller build volume, and the larger, more expensive printers like the Saturn 2 8K, that's got a very big build volume for a resin printer. That's more up there in the £400-500 mark. But it depends what you want to print. So the print volume is something you would need to look at into your specific circumstances. So if you're printing, for example, 6mm miniatures or 15mm, and you're quite happy with the amount of print volume, so you can fit quite a lot on the build plate itself, you might be happy with the smaller build plate. Or if you're still printing 28, you can still print 28mm miniatures fine. You just can't print as many at once. So you would do one set of printing, and then you'd have to print another set. So it's not a drama, it's just a time thing. What I've found quite nicely with the Saturn now is I can probably print, I would say 10 miniatures at 28mm quite comfortably with supports, and that does it fine. So I get 10 on the go. So I'm doing regiments at 20 at the minute, so I print 10 off. Then I start the process of cleaning up, and we'll go into that in another video, what cleaning up is and how you do that with resin and working with it safely. But I then set the second lot off. But having the Saturn has definitely worked for myself, but again, it might not work for individual circumstances. You might be quite happy with a Mars, and I know many a Wargamer that's got a Elegoo Mars or an Anycubic Photon, and they're completely happy with that. So other things to consider with 3D printing is ventilation. I'm quite lucky in this room. I've got a window just here, and I tend to leave that open while I'm printing. And you can see behind me with the Saturn and also the Mars, they both come with a purification unit, so it gets rid of that smell. It doesn't get rid of the actual chemicals per se itself that it can be produced from resin 3D printing, but the smell associated with it gets reduced. But if you've got a nice bit of airflow going through the room, this again is down to safety and preference. You can go as far to as having a proper unit attached to the back here that extracts all the resin smells and bits and bobs out. I'm quite happy to leave it in here. I don't do a huge amount of printing, like massive batches. I'm not a company or anything like that. When I'm done, I clean up, I put the resin away, so it's not just sat around creating fumes or anything like that. But resin safety is definitely something to consider. It's a massive thing. It's how well you want to take that yourself. But for me, I leave it there in the background, running, doing its thing. So that's resin printing in itself. We haven't even touched on cleaning up or anything like that. We'll go into that into a different video. I'm trying to keep these quite reasonably short to keep attention spans, because I know that if you get a 40-minute video and it just keeps dragging on and people just gonna, you're gonna skip through it, you might miss a bit of vital information. But that's just the printer in a nutshell. What a resin printer is. I've given you some comparisons of some low-end budget 3D printers. Go online, have a check. You've got the Elegoo and you've got the Anycubic. They are really good basic starter stuff. Just to give you a quick rundown of what I like about each of them. The Anycubic stuff is cheaper, so if your budget's tight, you can go for that. You can go for the Anycubic. It's not a problem. You've got the X2, which I've shown you, which has got a large build volume for a great price. Especially seeing it today, what I've seen on Amazon, that was a really good price, down at $279 or $259. Really, really good price. It's only slightly smaller than the Saturn 2. I think it's 20mm, I believe, smaller for the actual length, but the width back is the same. So you have to weigh yourself up these extra bits. It's not just that. The Saturn 2 comes with a carbon filter, which I find really good. Also comes with a dual Z-axis as well, which helps stabilize the prints while they're going. I think the X2 might as well. You have to double check that in their specs, but it is an 8K machine compared to the 4K of the X2. So again, you're getting a better resolution from the Saturn 2, and once it's dialed in and you're using the 8K resin, you will notice the difference in the detail with the miniatures if you like to look at them up close. So that's another thing to consider, whether you want to do that. with the smaller systems. So you've got the Mars 3 Pro and you've got the Photon Mono 2, both again 4Ks, and both again on that lower end side. The Anycubic one is cheaper to the Mars 3 Pro, but again you get the carbon filter, which I find helps with the smell. And yeah, I lean towards Elegoo because I just like the design of it. If I was to go for the lower end, I'd probably go for the Anycubic. If I was going to go for the actual smaller printer, if the money was, if it's a budgetary thing, I think the Anycubic is absolutely fine. I think for the price, it's brilliant, and what you get is great. You can always add air purification units as a separate sort of thing, so you can get an external one for the room when you've got a bit more budget. If I was going for the upper two, now this is where it gets a bit tight. I feel I'd probably still go for the Saturn, just because I don't mind spending a little bit more money to get a little bit more detail and a little bit more build volume. Price for me in that regard, I still think it's really good value at 386. I think that's a really good value at the minute, since I paid close to 550 for mine, and that was only 6 months ago. So you can see how the resin technology moves on. I would probably still go for the Saturn 8K, but again, for the money, bang in the middle, you can't ignore the X2 from Anycubic for 259, I believe, or 279. Sorry, I keep getting those two figures mixed up. I don't think you can ignore that. For the build volume that you get for it, yes, it's only a 4K. I say yes, it's only a 4K. 4K is more than adequate. You get really great looking miniatures. You won't notice the difference at the even, I'd say, 2-foot rule. You wouldn't even notice the difference. The 8K, I think, is more if you've got those centerpieces that stand out, like you've got your big dragons and stuff. And once you dial these printers in, which I'm going to show you in a future video, that's the most important thing, is dialing these printers in, getting consistent results each time, and I will show you how to do that. We're going to talk through temperatures of resin, what's the optimal temperature, how to create that environment where that temperature stays the same whether you're in a cold environment or a hot environment. What you're going to be doing for that's all coming up in future videos, and obviously we're going to go into talking about FDM style printers as well, so the one next to me. But first we're going to concentrate on the resin, because I think that's going to be the most popular for your miniatures. So I hope everyone's found this interesting. I hope you've managed to take something out of it. As always, in the comment section below, please ask any questions. I'm more than happy to answer. I've also created a 3D Wargamer Facebook group. It is literally just going to be on there for talking about 3D Wargaming. I don't want it to just become a spam fest of putting stuff that's not 3D printing involved in there. It is literally just going to be 3D printing Wargaming. You can talk about the printers, talk about files, you can talk about anything to do with 3D printing. It's a go on there. But yeah, it's an interesting journey. I hope you found this first video somewhat interesting, and I hope I've done a decent job. There's probably so much I've missed out on it, but as I've said, check the comments below. People have got ideas of what they want to see next, let me know. But next one, we're going to go into actually what's an STL file, how do we use a slicer, what is a slicing software, what slicing software do I use, and we're going to go into that. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. I shall see you again very soon, and bye bye.